This video is only possible thanks to viewers like you. To support the channel and get more, go to patreon.com/optimisticduelist and subscribe. Link in the description. Carapacians, often called chess people, are one of the many life forms native to Spurb, meant to enable its complex, self-perpetuating logic. As the nickname implies, they're styled after chess pieces and come in either black and white variants. They also come with both sharp and blunt teeth, implying that different members of the species might be either carnivores or herbivores. Unlike underlings and the monsters in the battlefield, prototypings don't affect them unless they have the Queen's Ring. The King's Scepter also imbues the wielder with prototypings, but it only works for the king. That said, the scepter also has innate powers that any Carapacian can use, such as starting the Reckoning. This is likely meant to evoke how pawns can become queens when they reach the end of the chessboard. Carapacians also have perfect spatial memory, and the ability to translate that memory into any units of their choosing, like inches, yards, or metric. They also have very long lifespans and seem to be immune to old age and illness, which is necessary since Gaia often selects random Carapacians in any given Spurb game to be exiled from the session and into the host planet the game spawns from, where they'll serve a few crucial purposes. The first is to eventually rebuild civilization on the devastated planet. To assist with this, Carapacians are predisposed to latching onto particular principles of governance and ideal jobs within that structure, which makes them natural-born builders and societal maintainers. For example, our main exiles have passions for democracy / being a mayor, male / being a male woman, and justice / being a judge. And so on. This is why the heroes didn't need to do the grunt work of building Earthsea society once they won the game. The Carapacians are quite literally innately driven to do that kind of thing. They might have a variety of names and aliases across their lives, but they tend to keep the same initials for all of them, with the notable exceptions of Jack Noir and the Troll's Black Queen. While it's implied that Spurb can pick literally any Carapacian to become an exile, exiles tend to end up playing prominent roles in their Spurb games before they meet their fates. Notable Carapacians in Homestuck fall into one of three categories. The Royalty, the kings and queens of both Durs and Prospect. These are set up to be particularly useful or challenging pieces in the game of Spurb, and in a normal session, the Black King and Queen are usually the endgame bosses. Predictably, none of them end up mattering in the beta session, so we're moving on. Next, we've got the Agents, who are a set of recurring antagonists, high-ranking Durs officials who serve directly under the Queen. They're based off card suits. The Courtyard Droll is clubs, the Hegemonic Brute is hearts, the Draconian Dignitary is diamonds, and Jack Noir represents spades. Jack is the most important of these by far, and the other three are basically his underlings. Jack tends to break the naming convention for Carapaces, instead adopting wildly different aliases including Spade Slick, Sovereign Slayer, Beck Noir, and at one point, Jack Spurs Noir Crow. I'm not even kidding, thank God that one didn't last. Fittingly, Jack is a bit of a wild card built into Spurb's logic. As the card suit motif might imply, Jack is the third in command in Durs, directly under the king and queen. But he's got an inherently testy relationship with the queen, and that combined with his generally violent and power-hungry attitude means he'll often end up rebelling and staging a coup, or partnering with the players of any given game in an attempt to usurp the king and queen and become the ace. This makes him a tenuous ally to the trolls, and the beta kid's worst nightmare. Especially once Becquerel prototypes himself, giving Jack first guardian powers. He's also a bit of a favorite of Caliborn's, who enjoys his no-nonsense cruelty and power-hungry ambition. Caliborn will use and exploit various versions of Jack to achieve his objectives across many sessions of the game. All in all, that probably makes him the most important carapace in the story. Finally, we have otherwise random NPCs who get really important in one session or another for some reason. These really only show up in the beta session. They're the mayor, the mail lady, and the justice guy we mentioned before. War-weary villain stages a rebellion against the Black King, but his army gets killed off by Jack Noir soon after. He wanders around Skya in guilt until he meets up with John, who sends him on a quest that ends up getting him exiled, where he becomes the Wayward Vagabond. Parcel Mistress ends up having to strike a deal with Jack that involves delivering the crowns of the White Queen and King. Also, she can deliver John's birthday present to him. The whole process leaves her kind of jaded, but in the process she earns Jack's respect and becomes kind of a badass, honestly. Then she exiles herself and becomes the Peregrine Mendicant. Once the White Queen hears about PM's quest, she decides to exile herself and has PM tell the White King to do the same, and they become the Windswept Questant and the Rick Keeper respectively. She tries to restart civilization on Earth and seal the planet off from Jack, but her plan tragically fails and then they die. The Authority Regulator pretty much just messes stuff up for PM, forcing her to go on the quest in the first place, and then sacrifices himself to save John during the Reckoning. At that point, he becomes the aimless renegade and is mostly just kind of a goofy friend who, oops, almost tries to kill PM and WV a couple times. He almost does something useful, but then the Queen's plan fails and he dies too. Rest in peace. Only WV and PM survive the beta session. PM puts on the Queen's ring and acquires powers to match Beck Noir's, at which point he falls in love with her. PM sends WV to the Troll's Meteor through her first Guardian powers to save him from bleeding to death, and then chases Beck Noir down through the void for 3 years to dispense the ultimate delivery: justice. WV becomes a cute sidekick to Dave and Karkat, and ultimately builds Cantown, the first iteration of society on Earthsea. Beck Noir becomes just one of 3 Jack Noirs opposing our heroes in the final session, and PM becomes the badass that ultimately takes him down. None of the other exiles really amount to much, sadly. But along the way to their tragic end, the group of beta exiles come across various command stations where they fulfill their most important function: connecting to the players of their session and planting thoughts in their heads through commands, thus leading them to take actions particularly important to the game's time loop. WV's station connected to John, PM's connected to Jade, AR's connected to Dave, and the Queen's connected to Rose. Among other things, Homestuck is a story about people reading Homestuck. Whenever you see a character engaging with other characters through a screen, they are always representative of some part of Homestuck's own readership. The Exiles are the first quote-unquote Homestuck viewers we're introduced to, and the ones who reflect the experience of Homestuck's earliest audience. In the early game, from Acts 1 to 3 and a little into 4, the audience was actually able to submit commands to HSE through the now-defunct MSPA forums. The Exiles would interrupt this practice, replacing the audience's messages to the characters with their own. However, the audience would later be able to give commands to the Exiles for a while instead. Of course, by Act 4, reader commands were phased out of the story completely. This would eventually be mirrored in the narrative, too, since Ascension to God tier permanently disconnects a player from their Exiles command terminals, and by the time the beta session ended, all but one of the command terminals in the entire story would be completely irrelevant. For the most part, the Exiles commands aren't too plot critical. I mean, they're important, but the Exiles mostly just close small time loops by causing the kids to act in particular ways. We'll probably go over their most important contributions in character videos, so for this last section of the video, let me go over some interesting things I think the Exiles bring to light. Carapacians seem to have an innate, almost biological sense of the mythological roles of the heroes, and one of their earliest potential benefits is that they might inform the heroes of their roles. For example, it's from the White Queen that Rose first learns that she's a seer. But more interestingly, WV identifies John as a thief's apprentice and a rogue when he first meets him on Skya. This is at a point in the story when John is being led around by Vriska, which means WV is right in a way. And as it turns out, this section of the story culminates in John indeed using his powers to steal something, the tumor, right out of the battlefield's core. This suggests that learning from a thief made John a bit more of a thief himself, and that WB was somehow able to pick up on this nuance intuitively. This dovetails quite well with my theory on roleplay, which we fleshed out more in our video on Guardians and Ancestors, so check that out if you're interested. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks again for watching everyone. Till next time, keep rising. Huge thanks go out to my patrons for making this video possible. If you want to help support the channel and come join us at our awesome and growing Discord community, feel free to join us for as little as $1 a month. You can also find me on the r/Hiveswap Reddit and Discord. That's all for now, so thank you again, and as always, keep rising.